The dangerous men are never the loudest ones. They're the ones who make an entire room whisper. I learned that on a rainy Thursday night, while balancing a tray of martinis worth more than my monthly rent. The windows of Belladonna Steakhouse rattled softly beneath the storm outside. Manhattan glittered beyond the glass like a city pretending it had no darkness. Inside, everything smelled like expensive whiskey, truffle butter, and secrets rich people thought nobody noticed. My black heels pinched my feet so badly I'd stopped feeling my toes an hour ago. 12-hour shift. No break. 2 customers had already snapped their fingers at me like I was part of the furniture. I kept smiling anyway, because smiles paid rent. Table 16 needs another bottle. My manager barked from behind the bar. I grabbed the wine bottle before he could complain again. My hands ached from carrying trays since for that afternoon. Rent was due in 3 days. My younger brother's asthma medication was almost empty, and my landlord had taped another warning notice to our apartment door that morning. So no, I couldn't afford pride tonight. I rounded the corner toward the VIP section when somebody stuck out a polished loafer. My body lurched forward instantly. The wine bottle slipped from my hand. Red wine splashed across a white designer jacket worth more than my car. Silence swallowed the table. The man wearing the jacket stood slowly. Mid-50s. Silver watch. Artificial smile. The kind of rich that enjoyed humiliating people for sport. "Do you have any idea what this costs?" he asked loudly. Every nearby table turned toward us. Heat rushed into my face. "I'm sorry, sir." "Sorry." He laughed coldly. "You people always say sorry like it fixes stupidity." My fingers tightened around the towel in my hand. "Don't react. Don't lose the job. Don't cry." He stepped closer until I smelled cigar smoke on his breath. "Maybe if you get on your knees and apologize properly, I won't demand the manager fire you tonight." A few people laughed quietly. Nobody stopped him. Nobody ever stopped men like that. My heart pounded so hard it blurred my hearing. Then another voice cut through the room. Calm. Low. Controlled. Ask her the question first. The air changed instantly. I felt it before I even turned around. Conversation stopped. Glasses lowered. Even the piano player missed a note. In the far corner sat a man in a charcoal suit with one hand wrapped loosely around a whiskey glass. Damien Falco. I didn't know much about New York's underworld, but everyone knew that name. He looked younger than I expected. Early 30s maybe. Dark hair brushed back neatly. Sharp jawline. Stillness that felt dangerous somehow. Like a storm pretending to sleep. 2 men in black suits stood behind him near the wall. Watching everything. Watching everyone. Damien's eyes settled on me slowly. Gray-blue. Cold enough to quiet an entire restaurant. Then he asked the strangest question I had ever heard. What's the fastest way to survive powerful men? My throat tightened. Every person in the restaurant waited for my answer. The rich customer beside me smirked like this was entertainment. I should have apologized. Should have stayed quiet. Instead, exhaustion spoke for me. Never let them decide your worth. The room froze. Damien stared at me without blinking. And for the first time all night, the most feared man in New York looked completely speechless. Nobody moved for at least 3 seconds after I answered him. It felt like the entire restaurant forgot how to breathe. Rain streaked down the giant windows behind Damien Falco, turning Manhattan into blurred gold and black smears of light. The rich man beside me forced out an awkward laugh first. Cute speech from a waitress. His voice sounded thinner now, less confident. Damien never looked at him. His attention stayed locked on me like he was trying to solve a puzzle nobody else could see. Then he stood, slowly, calmly. Somehow that felt more intimidating than shouting ever could. He adjusted the cuff of his charcoal suit before walking toward us across the marble floor. Every step echoed softly beneath the piano music. The wealthy customer beside me stepped backward instinctively. I noticed that immediately. Powerful men only stepped back from stronger ones. Damien stopped less than 2 feet away from me. Up close, he smelled like cedarwood, rain, and expensive whiskey. His face was sharper than I realized from across the room. Controlled. Unreadable. But his eyes looked tired underneath the coldness. "What is your name?" he asked. "Celine Hart." "How long have you worked here, Celine Hart?" "Almost 3 years." His gaze dropped briefly to my hands. Red marks lined my fingers from carrying hot plates all night. Tiny burns decorated my wrist near my watch. 3 years in this place usually teaches people to lie better, he said quietly. I swallowed hard. I am too tired to lie tonight. Something flickered across his expression. Fast enough that I almost missed it. Not amusement exactly. Recognition maybe. Behind me, my manager suddenly rushed forward wearing the fake smile he reserved for wealthy customers. Mr. Falco, I sincerely apologize for the disruption. Celine is one of our best employees. Completely professional. Damien finally looked at him. Then perhaps you should treat her like one. The manager's smile collapsed instantly. Silence spread again around nearby tables. Nobody touched their food anymore. Damien reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a black card. No logo. No company name. Just a phone number embossed in silver. He placed it carefully on my tray beside the stained napkins. If anyone here threatens your job tonight, he said, call that number. My heartbeat stumbled. Why? The corner of his mouth moved slightly. Because I dislike watching people confuse money with permission. Then he turned and walked back toward the VIP section. Just like that. Conversations slowly restarted around the restaurant, softer than before. Nervous. Like everyone had collectively witnessed something they did not understand. My manager grabbed my elbow the second Damien disappeared behind the velvet partition. What did you say to him? He hissed. Nothing. Do not play stupid with me, Celine. His grip tightened slightly before releasing. Do you understand who that man is? Honestly, no. Not fully. But I understood enough. Men with bodyguards did not scare me. Men who controlled rooms with silence did. I finished my shift in a fog. Every time I crossed the dining room, I felt eyes following me. Customers whispered. Servers stared openly now. One waitress pulled me aside near the kitchen. You know he bought this restaurant for someone once, right? She whispered. What? Owner refused to reserve him a table. 2 weeks later, Damien owned the entire building. My stomach tightened. That should have terrified me more than it did. Around midnight, the storm outside worsened. Thunder rattled the windows while staff cleaned tables under dimmed chandeliers. I finally untied my apron near the employee lockers and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my brother. Panic hit instantly. I called him back before grabbing my coat. Owen, hey. He answered quietly between breaths. Sorry. Did not mean to scare you. Relief nearly buckled my knees. What happened? Asthma attack earlier. I used the last inhaler. Of course he did. I closed my eyes briefly. Prescription refill tomorrow. Another expense. Another bill. I am coming home now. I stepped outside into cold rain 20 minutes later. The city smelled like wet concrete and exhaust smoke. My apartment was 6 subway stops away. I pulled my coat tighter and hurried toward the curb. Then a black SUV rolled silently beside me. Tinted windows. Expensive enough to look dangerous. The rear passenger window lowered slowly. Damien Falco sat inside beneath soft amber light. His expression remained unreadable. Get in, Celine. My pulse spiked instantly. Why? Rain tapped softly against the vehicle roof while traffic hissed through puddles nearby. Damien studied me for one long second before answering. Because 2 men have been waiting across the street watching you leave for the last 40 minutes. My first instinct was to run. Not because I thought Damien Falco would hurt me. Because men like him changed lives too easily. Rain soaked through my coat collar while I stared at the black SUV idling beside the curb. Headlights from passing taxis streaked across the wet pavement like blurred gold ribbons. Who are they? I asked quietly. Damien glanced past me through the rain-speckled window. 2 men pretending not to watch you. My stomach tightened instantly. I turned slightly without making it obvious. Across the street, beneath the flickering awning of a closed pharmacy, 2 men stood smoking cigarettes. Baseball caps. Dark jackets. Both facing my direction. Maybe Damien was lying. Maybe this was manipulation. But the second man immediately looked away when my eyes drifted toward them. Fear crawled slowly beneath my ribs. I do not know them. That concerns me more, Damien said calmly. Thunder rolled somewhere above the skyline. One of the bodyguards stepped from the front passenger seat and opened the rear door beside Damien. Warm air drifted out carrying cedarwood and leather. Get in before they realize you noticed them, Damien said. I hated how quickly my survival instincts made the decision for me. The inside of the SUV looked quieter than the city outside. Soft amber lights glowed above dark leather seats. Rain tapped steadily against tinted windows while the driver pulled away from the curb. Nobody spoke for almost a full minute. Manhattan blurred outside in silver and neon streaks. I sat stiffly across from Damien with my soaked coat clutched tightly in my lap. You always get into strangers' cars? He finally asked. You always ask strangers personal questions? The faintest shadow of amusement touched his face. Gone almost immediately. Fair enough. His calmness unsettled me more than anger would have. Powerful people usually needed everyone around them to know they were powerful. Damien carried authority like gravity. Silent. Constant. I looked toward the partition separating us from the driver. Where are we going? Your apartment. My eyes narrowed instantly. How do you know where I live? I asked your manager for your employee file after dinner. That should have terrified me. Instead, exhaustion won again. That sounds illegal. Probably. Rainwater dripped from my sleeves onto the leather seat. I quickly tried wiping it away with my hand. Damien noticed instantly. Leave it. Sorry. You apologize too often. The words landed harder than they should have. I stared down at my hands instead. Tiny burn scars crossed my knuckles from years of restaurant kitchens and cheap coffee machines. People tip better when women apologize, I muttered. Silence followed that. Heavy silence. The kind that made me feel like he was thinking too carefully about my answer. Then Damien reached beside him and handed me a folded gray towel from the seat compartment. You are shivering. I took it carefully. Thank you. You still sound surprised by basic kindness. Something about the way he said it made my chest ache unexpectedly. Outside, the city shifted slowly from bright midtown towers toward older apartment blocks downtown. Less glass. More brick. More exhaustion. Damien watched the streets through the window with distant eyes. You asked me a strange question tonight, I said quietly. Which one? The one about surviving powerful men. He rolled the whiskey glass slowly between his fingers. Amber liquid caught the dim overhead light. And yet you answered immediately. Maybe because I have met enough powerful men already. His eyes moved toward me again. Sharper now. Interested. Your father? No, I hesitated briefly. Landlords. Managers. Customers. Doctors deciding whether my mother deserved another week in the hospital before she died. The confession slipped out before I could stop it. Damien said nothing. That somehow made it easier to continue. Power always looks the same eventually, I whispered. People with choices talking to people without them. The SUV grew very quiet after that. Even the bodyguard in the front seat stopped glancing backward. Damien stared at me for several seconds before looking away toward the rain-covered city again. Most people try to impress me, he said finally. You do not. Maybe because I am too tired. This time his mouth actually curved slightly. Small. Real. Human. My heartbeat stumbled unexpectedly. The SUV slowed near my apartment building 10 minutes later. The familiar brick complex looked worn beneath the rain and buzzing streetlights. Damien noticed the rusted fire escapes immediately. The broken security gate, too. You live here alone? With my younger brother. Damien nodded once toward the driver. The vehicle remained idling beside the curb. Go upstairs, he said calmly. Lock the door. Do not answer it for anyone tonight. Anxiety tightened my chest again. You still have not explained why those men were watching me. Damien's expression cooled instantly. Whatever softness existed seconds ago vanished beneath something harder. Older. Because, he said quietly, someone inside that restaurant recognized me tonight. He looked directly into my eyes then. Cold rain slid slowly down the windows around us. And now they are wondering why I noticed you. Fear changes the way a hallway sounds at 2 in the morning. I felt that the second I stepped out of Damien Falco's SUV. Rainwater dripped from the fire escape above my apartment entrance while the black vehicle idled silently beside the curb. The neighborhood looked different suddenly. Smaller. Darker. Every shadow felt awake. Damien remained inside the SUV watching me through the tinted window. Calm. Controlled. Like a man already calculating problems 10 steps ahead. I tightened my coat around myself and hurried toward the entrance door. Halfway there, I glanced back instinctively. The 2 men from outside the restaurant were gone. That should have comforted me. Somehow it made things worse. Apartment 4B smelled like tomato soup and old radiator pipes. The second I unlocked the door, Owen appeared from the couch wrapped in a faded Yankees blanket. His blonde hair stuck up messily from sleep. You are late, he mumbled. I know. Relief softened his face immediately when he saw me. Owen had been 14 for exactly 3 weeks and already looked older than most adults I knew. Too much worry did that to people. You okay? I asked quietly. He nodded once before noticing the rain soaking my coat. Did your subway break again? Something like that. I moved into the kitchen and checked his inhaler automatically. Empty. Completely empty. Anxiety squeezed my chest again. You should have called me sooner. You were working. His breathing still sounded slightly uneven beneath the words. Guilt settled heavily in my stomach. Every extra shift I worked still never seemed enough. Enough rent. Enough medicine. Enough sleep. Enough anything. I heated canned soup while Owen finished homework at the kitchen table. Outside, thunder rattled faintly across the city skyline. The old apartment windows trembled softly with every passing truck. Normal sounds. Familiar sounds. Yet I kept thinking about Damien's final warning downstairs. Someone noticed him talking to me. Someone was watching. Celine. Owen looked up from his notebook. You were staring at the microwave again. I blinked quickly. Sorry. Bad night. I almost lied automatically, then stopped myself. Weird night. Owen smirked slightly. Weird rich people. Very weird rich people. He laughed quietly before coughing into his sleeve. The sound immediately erased every other thought from my head. Tomorrow we refill your prescription, I said firmly. Before school. It costs too much. So does breathing. He rolled his eyes, but smiled anyway. That smile mattered more to me than sleep ever could. By 2:15 in the morning, Owen finally fell asleep on the couch beside the muted television. I covered him with another blanket before checking the apartment locks twice. Maybe 3 times. Rain continued tapping against the windows steadily. My nerves refused to settle. I should have been exhausted after 12 hours at the restaurant. Instead, adrenaline kept my body painfully alert. I changed into sweatpants and walked toward the tiny kitchen for water when headlights flashed suddenly across the apartment ceiling. I froze instantly. A black sedan slowed outside the building below. Not Damien's SUV. Different car. Different shape. My pulse accelerated hard enough to hurt. The sedan remained parked across the street with its engine running. I told myself not to panic. New York always had parked cars. Late-night drivers. Delivery workers. But then the driver's side door opened slowly. A man stepped out holding an umbrella. He looked directly toward my building, toward my windows. Cold fear crawled carefully up my spine. I stepped backward from the glass immediately and reached for my phone. My fingers hesitated over Damien's black card still sitting inside my coat pocket. This is ridiculous, I thought. I barely knew him. Powerful men always came with hidden costs. Yet downstairs, the stranger remained standing beside the sedan without moving. Watching. I swallowed hard and dialed the number anyway. The line rang once. Tell me what you see. Damien answered immediately. No greeting. No surprise. I moved farther from the windows instinctively. There is a car outside my building. Color. Black. How many men? My throat tightened. One that I can see. Silence filled the line briefly. Not empty silence. Focused silence. Then Damien spoke again, calmer than before somehow. Listen carefully, Celine. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. Rain hammered harder against the city outside. Do not turn on any lights, he said quietly. And do not look out the window again. There is something terrifying about hearing a calm voice during the exact moment you are starting to panic. I stood frozen in my dark kitchen, clutching my phone, while rain battered the apartment windows hard enough to sound like gravel. Across the room, Owen slept beneath the flickering television glow completely unaware. Celine, Damien said quietly through the phone. Answer me. I swallowed hard. I am here. Good. Tell me if the man approaches your building. I hated how steady his voice sounded compared to mine. Who is he? Silence stretched briefly across the line. Not hesitation. Calculation. I do not know yet. That answer chilled me more than honesty would have. I crouched slowly beside the kitchen counter and risked one careful glance toward the window reflection instead of looking directly outside. The black sedan remained parked near the curb. The man still stood beside it beneath the umbrella. Waiting. Watching. My pulse hammered painfully against my ribs. He is still there. Damien exhaled softly through the receiver. All right. That is all you are going to say? Panicking will not help you. Easy for you to say. Another silence followed. Softer this time. No, Damien said finally. It is not. Something about the exhaustion underneath those words caught me off guard. I tightened my grip on the phone. Why are you helping me? The question escaped before I could stop it. Thunder rolled low across Manhattan. Somewhere downstairs, a car alarm chirped briefly before cutting off again. Damien answered carefully. Because men like that usually mistake kindness for weakness. And what do men like you mistake it for? The line went very still. I instantly regretted asking. Then Damien gave a quiet laugh that sounded more surprised than amused. You really do not know when to stop challenging people. Maybe because nobody important ever listens when I stay quiet. He did not answer immediately. Outside, headlights flashed past the apartment building in long silver streaks. The stranger beside the sedan finally moved. My stomach dropped. He is walking, I whispered quickly. Toward the building? Yes. Damien's voice sharpened instantly. Take your brother and lock yourselves inside the bathroom. Fear shot through me hard and fast. What? Now, Celine. I hurried toward the couch and shook Owen awake gently. Hey, wake up. He blinked sleepily. What time is it? I need you to come with me. Anxiety must have shown on my face because his expression changed immediately. What happened? Nothing. Just move. I pulled him toward the bathroom while keeping the phone pressed against my ear. My bare feet slapped softly against the old hardwood floors. Every sound suddenly felt too loud, too exposed. Owen stared at me in confusion while I locked the bathroom door behind us. The tiny room smelled faintly like laundry detergent and steam. Celine, Damien said. Listen carefully. I pressed my back against the sink cabinet, trying to steady my breathing. Owen sat beside the bathtub, watching me nervously. There is a black fire escape behind your bathroom window, Damien continued. Do you see it? I glanced upward quickly. Rainwater streamed down the rusted metal ladder outside the small window. Yes. If anyone knocks on your apartment door, you leave immediately through that window. My heart nearly stopped. You think somebody is coming upstairs. I think somebody wants to scare you. That does not make me feel better. It is not supposed to. Footsteps echoed suddenly somewhere beyond the apartment hallway outside. Heavy. Slow. My entire body locked instantly. Owen heard them too. His eyes widened. Another step. Then another. Closer now. I covered Owen's mouth gently before he could speak. Rain hammered against the fire escape while the footsteps stopped directly outside our apartment. Silence swallowed everything afterward. Thick, suffocating silence. Then came 3 soft knocks against the front door. Not aggressive, not rushed. Somehow that felt worse. Owen's fingers tightened around my sleeve. My pulse pounded so violently I could hear it in my ears. Another knock echoed through the apartment. Calm, patient. Celine. The male voice outside sounded smooth and unfamiliar. I only want to ask you a few questions about Damien Falco. Every drop of blood seemed to drain from my body instantly. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. Damien's voice turned dangerously quiet. Open the bathroom window now. The sound of rain hitting metal becomes terrifying when you are climbing down a fire escape at 2:30 in the morning with your little brother shaking beside you. My fingers slipped against the wet ladder while Damien stayed on the phone the entire time. Calm, focused, like he had done this before. Too many times. Keep moving, he said quietly through the receiver. Do not stop until you reach the alley. Owen climbed carefully beneath me, wearing pajama pants and an oversized hoodie. His asthma made every nervous breath sound too loud in the storm. Above us, another knock echoed faintly through our apartment door. Patient. Controlled. Whoever stood outside knew we were still inside. Or thought we were. Cold rain soaked through my clothes completely before we reached the bottom landing. The alley behind our building smelled like wet brick and garbage bags split open by stray cats. New York looked uglier from the back entrances. More honest too. Left, Damien instructed immediately. There should be a black SUV waiting beside the alley entrance. My heartbeat stumbled. You already sent someone? I sent them the second you called me. Tires hissed softly somewhere nearby. Then headlights flashed once through the rain. A black SUV rolled slowly into view beside the alley mouth, exactly where Damien said it would be. One of the rear doors opened immediately. Miss Hart, a deep voice called over the storm. Get inside now. Owen looked at me nervously. Who are they? Honestly, I did not know. But standing in that alley suddenly felt more dangerous than trusting strangers connected to Damien Falco. We hurried into the SUV just as thunder cracked across the skyline above us. The doors shut heavily behind us. Warm air wrapped around my freezing skin instantly. The man in the front passenger seat glanced backward briefly. Mid-40s. Dark suit. Silver streaks near his temples. You are safe now, he said calmly. Nobody who lived Damien's life should have been able to say those words so gently. Owen stayed pressed against my side while the SUV pulled away from the curb. Rain blurred the city outside into glowing rivers of red and white light. My phone remained tight in my hand. Damien still had not disconnected. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. "No, your brother?" "He is okay." Owen mouthed. "Who is that?" silently beside me. I had no idea how to answer. "Good," Damien said. "You will stay somewhere else tonight." My exhaustion finally cracked into anger. "You still have not explained why this is happening." Silence. Then Damien answered carefully. "Because somebody believes you overheard something important tonight." I stared out the window at passing storefronts and sleeping apartment towers. I did not overhear anything. That does not matter. The truth in those words chilled me more than the storm outside. The older man in the passenger seat finally turned slightly toward us. "Miss Hart, my name is Vincent." His voice carried a faint Brooklyn accent, softened by age. "I have worked for Mr. Falco a long time." Owen leaned closer to me instinctively. Vincent noticed immediately and offered a small, reassuring smile. "Your brother is safe with us." I wanted to believe him. I hated that part of me already did. 20 minutes later, the SUV crossed onto quieter streets lined with dark trees and expensive townhouses hidden behind iron fences. Money changed the shape of silence itself. Rich neighborhoods never sounded desperate. The SUV finally stopped beneath a covered entrance outside a narrow stone building overlooking the Hudson River. Warm golden lights glowed behind tall windows. Everything looked expensive without trying to. Vincent stepped out first and opened our door beneath a large umbrella. "Come inside before you freeze." My wet sneakers squeaked softly across polished black floors once we entered. The lobby smelled faintly like cedarwood and coffee. No doorman. No residents. Too private. Too quiet. An elevator opened instantly, as if someone had already been waiting for us. Owen whispered beside me. "This place looks like a movie." Honestly, it did. The elevator climbed silently for several seconds before opening into a penthouse wrapped almost entirely in glass. Manhattan stretched beyond the windows, glowing silver beneath the storm clouds. For one dangerous second, I forgot to breathe. "You can stay here tonight," Vincent said. "Fresh clothes are already inside the guest rooms." My stomach tightened instantly. How would anyone know our sizes? Vincent adjusted his cufflinks calmly. "Mr. Falco notices details." That answer somehow unsettled me more than the stranger outside my apartment. Then another voice spoke quietly from across the penthouse. "And I dislike guests being uncomfortable." I turned instantly. Damien stood near the massive windows with one hand in his pocket and a whiskey glass resting beside him untouched. Dark city lights reflected faintly across his gray-blue eyes. He looked tired again, older somehow than he had inside the restaurant. "Welcome to my home, Celine," he said softly. "I wish it were under better circumstances." Rich people always say their homes are peaceful. They never admit peace usually comes from knowing nobody can reach them. I stood inside Damien Falco's penthouse, dripping rainwater onto marble floors that probably cost more than my entire apartment building. The city glowed beyond the glass walls like another universe entirely. Owen stared openly at everything. The giant piano near the windows. The fireplace stretching almost 12 feet across black stone. The shelves lined with old books instead of decorations. "This place is insane," he whispered. Damien's mouth curved slightly. That is usually the first reaction. Vincent disappeared quietly down a hallway while another man entered carrying folded clothes and towels. Nobody rushed. Nobody raised their voice. Everything inside this penthouse moved with controlled silence. Like the entire place understood Damien without needing instructions. That realization unsettled me deeply. "There are 2 guest rooms prepared," Damien said calmly. "You and your brother can rest safely here tonight." I folded my arms tightly across my chest. "And tomorrow?" His eyes settled on me carefully. "Tomorrow depends on whether tonight was random intimidation or something more organized." You keep saying things like that without explaining anything. Because explanations tend to make people panic. I am already panicking. That earned another almost smile from him. Small. Brief. Gone too fast. Fair point. Owen looked between us awkwardly before tugging lightly on my sleeve. "Can I use the bathroom?" "Of course." Damien nodded toward the hallway. "Second door on the left." Owen disappeared quickly while I remained standing near the elevator, trying not to look overwhelmed. My wet clothes clung uncomfortably to my skin now that adrenaline was fading. Exhaustion settled heavily into my bones. Damien noticed immediately. He always noticed everything. You are shivering again. I am fine. That answer usually means the opposite. I hated that he was right. Damien crossed slowly toward a cabinet near the fireplace and poured hot water from a silver kettle into a porcelain mug. Steam curled softly into the dim light above us. Tea, he asked. The question felt strangely normal after everything else tonight. You drink tea? My grandmother believed whiskey solved emotional problems. Tea solved physical ones. Despite myself, I laughed quietly. The sound surprised both of us. Damien handed me the mug carefully. Chamomile. Honey. Expensive honey, probably. My fingers warmed instantly around the porcelain. Thank you. He leaned lightly against the piano afterward, watching rain streak down the windows. You are not what I expected. What exactly did you expect? Someone more impressed by money. His honesty caught me off guard. Money stops being impressive when hospitals ask for it before helping people. Silence settled briefly between us again. Not uncomfortable exactly, just heavy with things neither of us fully understood yet. I studied him carefully over the rim of my mug. Damien Falco looked different here than inside the restaurant. Less like a myth, more like a man carrying something exhausting. His tie hung loose now. Dark circles shadowed beneath his eyes faintly. Do you ever sleep? I asked quietly. One eyebrow lifted slightly. Rarely. Why? He looked toward the storm outside before answering. Because powerful men make enemies faster than friends. The sadness underneath those words hit harder than I expected. Before I could respond, Owen reappeared holding an inhaler box. New. Unopened. My stomach tightened instantly. Celine, he whispered. Look. I took the box carefully. Same prescription. Same dosage. My name already printed on the pharmacy label. Filled tonight. I looked up sharply at Damien. How did you get this? Vincent called a 24-hour pharmacy. That prescription costs $300. Damien shrugged slightly. Then it is fortunate I could afford it. Owen stared at the inhaler like someone handed him oxygen itself. Gratitude flooded his face so quickly it hurt to witness. Thank you, Mr. Damien is fine. Owen nodded slowly before disappearing toward the guest room with the inhaler clutched tightly in his hands. I watched him go, feeling something dangerous crack quietly inside my chest. Nobody helped people like us without wanting something later. Nobody. You should not have done that, I whispered. Damien studied me carefully. Why? Because now I owe you. His expression changed instantly. Sharper somehow. More serious. No, Celine. His voice lowered quietly beneath the rain outside. You do not. The certainty in those words unsettled me more than threats ever could. I looked down into the tea, trembling faintly between my hands. I do not understand you. Damien stared at me for several long seconds before answering. That makes two of us. Then somewhere inside the penthouse, a phone suddenly rang sharply through the silence. Vincent appeared instantly from the hallway with tension written across his face. Damien, he said quietly. There is a problem. The entire atmosphere changed immediately. Damien's posture straightened. Every trace of softness vanished behind something colder. Dangerous. What happened? Vincent hesitated briefly before answering. The men outside Celine's apartment were not working alone. The most frightening thing about dangerous people is how quickly warmth disappears when trouble enters the room. 1 second Damien stood beside me holding quiet conversation beside the fireplace. The next, every trace of humanity vanished behind cold focus. Vincent lowered his voice carefully. One of the men followed the fire escape after they realized the apartment was empty. My stomach tightened instantly. Damien's jaw sharpened beneath the dim light. How close? Close enough to know she escaped recently. Silence spread through the penthouse. Heavy. Controlled. Owen peeked nervously from the hallway, clutching his new inhaler against his chest. Damien noticed him immediately and softened his tone by half a degree. Go back to your room, Owen. Are we in trouble? Damien held the boy's gaze steadily. Not if everyone listens carefully. Owen nodded slowly before disappearing again. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself, trying to ignore the panic building under my ribs. This is insane, I whispered. I worked a double shift serving pasta 12 hours ago. Damien looked toward me carefully. Unfortunately, dangerous situations rarely care about ordinary schedules. Vincent's phone buzzed softly again. He checked the screen instantly. Security confirmed another vehicle circling the block outside. My pulse stumbled hard. You said this place was safe. Damien crossed toward the windows overlooking the Hudson River. Rain blurred the skyline behind him into silver smoke. It is. Then why does it feel like somebody is hunting me? His shoulders stiffened almost invisibly. Because somebody might be. The honesty knocked the breath from my lungs. I stared at him, waiting for reassurance that never came. Instead, Damien reached for the untouched whiskey glass beside the piano before setting it aside again without drinking. Sit down, Celine. I do not want tea anymore. Good. Because this conversation requires honesty instead. Something in his voice made me obey despite myself. I lowered slowly onto the couch near the fireplace while Vincent remained near the elevator speaking quietly into an earpiece. Damien sat across from me with his forearms resting loosely against his knees. Calm posture. Dangerous eyes. There are people in this city, he said carefully, who believe any unexpected interaction around me could threaten their business. What business? His gaze sharpened. The kind you do not want explained at 3 in the morning. I think we passed the point where protecting my innocence matters. That earned the faintest flicker of approval across his expression. Fair enough. Rain tapped softly against the massive windows around us. The entire penthouse suddenly felt too high above the world. Too isolated. Damien leaned back slowly. Tonight at the restaurant, you embarrassed a man publicly connected to one of my rivals. Confusion tightened across my face. The customer with the wine stain? His name is Harold Mercer. He launders money through several restaurants and real estate groups downtown. The words sounded unreal leaving his mouth, like television dialogue instead of my actual life. And because I answered your question, Mercer assumed I noticed you for a reason. I stared at him incredulously. That is insane. Yes. Damien's agreement came instantly. Calmly. Unfortunately, paranoia built most criminal empires long before intelligence did. I rubbed exhausted hands over my face, trying to process everything. So now what? Now they watch you, hoping you lead them toward information. I do not have information. Again, Damien said quietly, that does not matter. The fireplace crackled softly between us afterward. Orange light flickered across Damien's face, revealing exhaustion he usually kept hidden beneath control. I studied him carefully for several seconds. You really live like this every day? His eyes drifted briefly toward the rain-covered skyline. More or less. That sounds miserable. The corner of his mouth moved slightly. You are the first person brave enough to say that directly. Maybe everyone else is too distracted by your expensive suits. A quiet laugh escaped him unexpectedly. Real this time. Warm enough to transform his entire face for one dangerous second. My heartbeat reacted before my brain could stop it. That terrified me almost as much as the men outside. Damien noticed my expression immediately. Of course he did. He noticed everything. You should sleep, he said more softly now. You are exhausted. I do not think sleep is possible anymore. You would be surprised what the body eventually forces itself to do. Vincent crossed toward us suddenly with tension returning hard across his features. Damien. The warmth vanished instantly again. What? Vincent hesitated carefully before answering. One of Mercer's men was seen speaking with someone inside Belladonna after closing. Damien's eyes narrowed. Who? Vincent looked toward me briefly before speaking. Celine's manager. Cold realization slid through my chest like ice water. Damien stood immediately. Get security on every entrance. My voice came out barely above a whisper. He gave them my address. Damien looked directly at me then. Calm. Furious. Protective. Somehow all three at once. Yes, he said quietly. I believe he did. Nothing destroys your trust in ordinary life faster than realizing somebody sold your address for money. I sat frozen beside Damien's fireplace while rain hammered the penthouse windows and one terrible thought repeated endlessly inside my head. My manager knew where Owen slept. Damien crossed toward the bar slowly, though he never actually poured himself a drink. He looked calmer now. That frightened me more than anger would have. Truly dangerous people became quieter when they were furious. Vincent adjusted the earpiece beneath his collar. Security teams are already downstairs. Damien nodded once. Nobody enters this building without approval. Already handled. I stared at them both, trying to understand how this had become my reality overnight. 12 hours ago, I was arguing with customers about overcooked steak. Now armed security apparently guarded elevator access because of me. I should call the police, I whispered suddenly. Damien's expression shifted instantly. No, the sharpness in his voice startled even me. Why not? Because Mercer owns too many people inside this city. That sounds paranoid. That sounds accurate. Silence settled heavily afterward. Deep down, part of me already believed him. That was the worst part. Owen stepped carefully from the guest room, wearing oversized sweatpants someone clearly bought for him tonight. He looked younger suddenly, more frightened. Celine. I forced softness into my voice immediately. Yeah. Can we go home tomorrow? The question nearly broke my heart. Before I could answer, Damien spoke gently from across the room. Not tomorrow. Owen lowered his eyes. I hate this place. Damien nodded slowly like he understood completely. I hated it too when I first moved here. Owen looked surprised. Honestly, so did I. You did? Damien leaned lightly against the piano beside the windows. When I was 14, I thought expensive apartments fixed loneliness. Rainwater streaked silver behind him across the glass skyline. Turns out they only make loneliness quieter. Something flickered across Owen's face then. Recognition, maybe. Children always recognized sadness faster than adults did. My sister says weird rich people are dramatic, Owen muttered softly. To my horror, Damien laughed. A real laugh this time. Low and warm enough to soften the entire room briefly. Your sister is not entirely wrong. Owen smiled despite himself before yawning hard. Exhaustion finally pulling him downward again. Vincent guided him gently toward the hallway afterward. Come on, kid. Let us find something terrible on television. Once they disappeared, silence returned immediately. Heavy. Private. I stared at Damien carefully across the firelight. You are different with him. Children deserve honesty, he said quietly. Adults usually weaponize it. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself. You still have not told me why people fear you so much. Damien's eyes settled on the storm outside again. Because fear is efficient. That sounds lonely too. He looked at me sharply then. Like nobody ever said things like that directly to him. Maybe nobody did. I stood slowly from the couch, needing movement more than comfort. The penthouse stretched enormous and silent around us. Every surface looked polished enough to reflect secrets. Do you ever get tired? I asked quietly. Of everyone expecting monsters from you? Damien watched me carefully for several seconds before answering. Eventually people become whatever the world survives best around. The sadness beneath those words hit me harder than I expected. I moved toward the windows, overlooking the river below. Rain blurred the city lights into trembling streaks. Somewhere out there, people were still eating dinner, watching movies, falling asleep beside ordinary lives. I did not ask for any of this, I whispered. Damien crossed the room slowly until he stood beside me. Not touching, just close enough that I felt warmth beside the cold glass. I know. Then why does it feel like my life disappeared overnight? His reflection met mine faintly in the storm-dark window. Because danger changes people faster than time does. We stood there silently afterward, watching rain sweep across Manhattan in silver waves. For one dangerous second, the fear faded enough for me to notice something else entirely. Damien Falco looked exhausted beyond words. Not physically, spiritually. Like carrying power had slowly hollowed him out from the inside. Then his phone buzzed sharply against the marble counter behind us. The atmosphere shifted instantly again. Damien answered without taking his eyes off the storm. Talk. A male voice crackled faintly through the speaker. Urgent. Fast. Damien's expression hardened immediately. When? Silence. Then another answer from the phone. My pulse accelerated watching his face change. Understood, Damien said quietly. He ended the call slowly afterward. What happened? I asked. Damien slipped the phone back into his pocket without looking away from the city below. Mercer's people broke into your apartment 30 minutes ago. My breath caught instantly. Owen's room was destroyed, Damien said carefully. They wanted you terrified. Cold horror crawled through my chest slowly. Did they find anything? Damien finally looked directly at me then. Gray blue eyes colder than the storm outside. Yes, he said quietly. They found the black card I gave you. The moment fear becomes personal is when strangers stop watching you and start touching the things you love. I could not stop imagining Owen's room. His baseball posters. His inhaler beside the bed. The old lamp our mother bought before she died. Random men had walked through all of it tonight because of me. Because I answered one question honestly. I wrapped both arms around myself beside the penthouse window, trying to breathe normally. Damien remained terrifyingly calm nearby. Did they take anything else? I asked quietly. No, then why leave the card? Because they wanted me to know they found it. His voice carried no panic, only calculation. That somehow made everything feel more dangerous. The fireplace crackled softly behind us while rain blurred Manhattan into silver shadows. This is insane, I whispered again. I am a waitress. Damien's eyes settled on me carefully. No, you are leveraged now. The words landed like ice water down my spine. Before I could answer, Owen appeared sleepily from the hallway, rubbing one eye. I cannot sleep. The fear vanished from Damien's face instantly, hidden again behind calm control. Bad dreams? He asked gently. Owen shrugged weakly. I keep thinking about our apartment. So was I. Damien crossed toward the kitchen silently before returning with another mug of tea. He handed it to Owen carefully like he had done this before. When I was younger, Damien said quietly, I used to count thunderstorms instead of sleeping. Owen looked up curiously. Why? Because storms eventually pass. The simplicity of the answer hit me unexpectedly hard. Owen nodded slowly before curling into the giant couch beneath a blanket Vincent had brought earlier. Within minutes, exhaustion pulled him asleep again beside the fireplace glow. Damien lowered the television volume carefully afterward. Small gesture. Thoughtful gesture. Dangerous gesture. Men like him were easier to hate when they acted cruel. You are good with him, I whispered. Damien remained standing near the couch, watching Owen sleep. Children usually know exactly who you are. And adults. His expression dimmed slightly. Adults see what benefits them most. Silence drifted softly between us after that. I studied Damien more openly now beneath the dim penthouse lights. Expensive suit. Perfect posture. Eyes too tired for someone barely in his 30s. You keep talking like you hate this life. A faint smile touched his mouth without reaching his eyes. Hating something does not always mean escaping it. The honesty in that sentence felt too real to be rehearsed. Vincent reappeared near the hallway entrance carrying a tablet and several printed papers. Security reviewed footage from Belladonna, he said quietly. Damien's entire demeanor sharpened instantly again. And Vincent handed him one photograph first. Even from across the room, I recognized my manager immediately standing beside a bald man near the restaurant kitchen exit. Who was that with him? I asked. Vincent answered before Damien could. Marcus Vale. My stomach tightened. I know that name. Damien glanced toward me carefully. You should. Vincent placed another photo onto the marble counter. Marcus exiting the same black sedan from earlier tonight. The one outside my building. Cold realization flooded through me instantly. He was at the restaurant. Damien nodded once. Watching. For what? Damien looked down at the photograph silently for several seconds. For weakness. Rain rattled harder against the penthouse windows while Vincent continued speaking quietly about security rotations and surveillance updates. Most of it sounded unreal to me, like listening to another language entirely. Then one sentence cut through everything else. Mercer requested a meeting tomorrow night, Vincent said carefully. Damien's eyes lifted instantly. Where? The Harbor Club in Brooklyn. Silence settled hard afterward. Dangerous silence. Vincent lowered his voice slightly. He specifically requested Celine attend. Every muscle in my body tightened. Absolutely not. Damien answered before Vincent could speak again. I already refused once. And Damien's jaw hardened faintly. Mercer implied refusing twice would be interpreted as disrespect. I stared at him incredulously. You are talking about me like I am part of some business deal. Damien looked toward me immediately. Something almost guilty flickered beneath his expression. That is exactly why you are not going. But they already dragged me into this. Which means my responsibility is removing you from it. The certainty in his voice stunned me briefly. Nobody had spoken about protecting me like that in a very long time. Vincent's phone buzzed suddenly again. He checked the screen and frowned. Another issue. Damien exhaled slowly. Tonight keeps improving. Vincent hesitated before speaking. Security found a tracking device attached beneath your SUV. The entire room went still instantly. Even the rain suddenly sounded quieter. Damien's eyes darkened dangerously. How long has it been there? Unknown. My pulse accelerated watching both men exchange silent understanding. Then Damien turned slowly toward the windows overlooking Manhattan. That means Mercer never cared about Celine's apartment, he said quietly. He wanted this address instead. The moment you realize powerful people are afraid is the moment you understand how dangerous the situation truly is. Damien stood motionless beside the penthouse windows while lightning flashed silently across the Hudson River behind him. A tracking device. Someone had followed him here. Someone wanted inside this building badly enough to risk provoking Damien Falco directly. Vincent lowered his voice further. Security swept the garage twice tonight. Nothing appeared until after the restaurant. Damien's expression remained unreadable, meaning Mercer attached it during the chaos outside Belladonna. I stared between them, trying to keep up with a conversation that sounded impossible. So this was never about me? Damien looked toward me carefully. It became about you the second they realized I cared whether you were safe. The words hit harder than they should have. My heartbeat reacted instantly before logic could catch up. I looked away toward the storm-dark windows. You barely know me. That has not stopped me from noticing you. Silence followed immediately after he said it. Heavy silence. Dangerous silence. Even Vincent suddenly looked interested in the floor instead of us. Owen remained asleep on the couch beneath the blanket, completely unaware his entire life had shifted overnight. Damien crossed slowly toward the fireplace and lowered the flames slightly. The movement felt strangely domestic for someone discussing criminal surveillance 5 seconds earlier. Mercer wants leverage, Damien continued quietly. Fear is cheaper than loyalty. Easier too. Then why not just tell him I know nothing? Damien's eyes darkened slightly. Because men like Mercer do not stop once they begin pulling threads. Rainwater streaked down the glass walls around us like tears across steel. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself, suddenly feeling very small inside the enormous penthouse. I want my old life back. The honesty escaped before I could stop it. Damien's face softened almost imperceptibly. So do I. I looked up sharply. What? He leaned one hand against the piano beside him. You think I always live like this? I think you have not worried about rent in a long time. That earned a quiet laugh from him. Brief. Tired. Fair point. Then his expression dimmed again. But there was a time before all this. Something about the way he said all this made it sound heavier than money or power. Like he carried something invisible nobody else could see. Vincent stepped away toward the balcony, speaking quietly into another call. For the first time all night, Damien and I stood completely alone in the silence. What happened to that version of you? I asked softly. Damien stared at the rain beyond the windows for several long seconds before answering. He trusted the wrong people. The sadness in his voice unsettled me more than fear ever had. Because suddenly Damien Falco did not sound powerful. He sounded lonely. Before I could respond, the penthouse lights flickered once. Then again. Every muscle in Vincent's body tightened instantly across the room. Backup generators should not be triggering, he said sharply into his earpiece. Damien's comm vanished immediately. How many cameras just went offline? Vincent checked the tablet in his hand. Garage level. East entrance. Elevator security feed. My stomach dropped. That sounds bad. Damien crossed toward the hallway instantly. Stay with Owen. Where are you going? To make sure this building remains secure. Fear surged hard through my chest unexpectedly. You cannot leave us alone. The words came out before pride could stop them. Damien paused instantly. He looked back at me across the firelight. Something shifted behind his eyes then. Something dangerously soft. Celine. My throat tightened. Please. One simple word. Honest. Exhausted. Real. Damien studied me for several seconds before exhaling quietly. Vincent goes downstairs instead. Vincent looked mildly offended. I appreciate the confidence. You are harder to replace. Vincent muttered something under his breath, but headed toward the elevator immediately afterward. The penthouse suddenly felt enormous once he left. Too quiet. Too high above the city. Damien moved back toward the windows beside me after locking the private elevator manually himself. Nobody reaches this floor now without permission, he said quietly. Good. Another flash of lightning illuminated the skyline silver blue for one brief second. I noticed then that Damien's hands were trembling faintly against the piano edge. Not fear. Adrenaline maybe. Anger. You are shaking, I whispered. He glanced downward briefly like he had not noticed until now. Lack of sleep. That is not healthy. His mouth curved faintly. You sound like my doctor. You have a doctor? Apparently several. I almost smiled despite everything. Then a sharp sound echoed suddenly from somewhere deeper inside the penthouse. Glass breaking. Both of us froze instantly. Owen startled awake on the couch. Damien stepped in front of me automatically before I even realized he moved. Protective instinct. Immediate. Absolute. Another noise echoed faintly down the hallway toward the private study. Damien's entire body went still beside me. Cold. Focused. Dangerous. Then he whispered something that made my blood run cold instantly. Nobody else should be inside this floor. The sound of breaking glass at 4 in the morning changes your heartbeat forever. Owen shot upright on the couch instantly, while Damien stepped fully in front of us, without hesitation. One arm extended slightly behind him like instinct alone had decided we mattered. Rain hammered against the penthouse windows hard enough to blur the skyline completely now. Somewhere down the dark hallway, another faint noise echoed again. Metal scraping softly against wood. Damien's voice dropped low and calm. "Stay here." "Absolutely not," I whispered immediately. He glanced back at me sharply. "Celine, you think I am letting you walk toward some stranger alone?" For one dangerous second, something almost human flashed behind his guarded expression. Surprise maybe. Then it vanished beneath focus again. "You should be afraid right now." "I am." "Then listen to me." Owen clutched the blanket tightly beside the couch. "What is happening?" Damien softened instantly when he looked at him. "Probably a false alarm." "You are a terrible liar," Owen muttered. Even now, Damien almost smiled. Thunder cracked loudly above the river outside. Then every light inside the penthouse suddenly went dark. Owen inhaled sharply beside me. My pulse slammed painfully against my ribs while Manhattan vanished beyond the windows into storm-black emptiness. Emergency backup lights flickered on seconds later, casting the penthouse in dim amber shadows. Somehow that looked even more frightening. Damien moved instantly toward a drawer beneath the piano and pulled out a flashlight. The beam cut sharply across the marble floors and dark hallway ahead. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. I grabbed Owen's hand automatically and followed anyway despite every survival instinct screaming not to. The hallway toward the private study stretched long and silent beneath low golden lights. Family photographs lined one wall unexpectedly. Younger versions of Damien standing beside older men in tailored suits. Formal smiles. Empty eyes. Then one photograph caught my attention completely. Damien around 16 beside a dark-haired woman smiling warmly with one hand against his cheek. His mother maybe. The only picture where he looked genuinely happy. Another sound echoed ahead. Closer now. A drawer closing softly. Damien's entire body tightened instantly. He pushed the study door open slowly. The flashlight swept across towering bookshelves, shattered glass near the balcony entrance, and papers scattered across the floor. Rain blew inward through the cracked balcony door, carrying cold wind into the room. But nobody stood inside. "They were here," Damien said quietly. He crossed toward a large mahogany desk, immediately checking drawers with frightening efficiency. "Looking for what?" I asked. His expression darkened. "Something they should not know exists." Owen pointed suddenly toward the floor near the bookshelf. "What is that?" A small silver object rested beside the broken glass. Damien picked it up carefully. My stomach tightened instantly when I saw his face change. Not fear. Recognition. "You know who left it?" I whispered. Damien stared at the object silently for several seconds before answering. "Yes." "Who?" He slipped the silver piece into his pocket immediately. "Someone who knows this apartment too well." Cold realization crept slowly through my chest. An inside person. Damien looked toward the rain-covered balcony without denying it. Possibly. The thought terrified me more than strangers outside ever had. Betrayal always meant somebody had been close enough to earn trust first. Vincent burst from the elevator moments later, soaked with rainwater and breathing harder than before. Security lost one man downstairs during the blackout. Damien's eyes sharpened dangerously. "How?" Temporary power failure opened the garage access gate for 11 seconds. 11 seconds. That was all it took. Vincent noticed the broken balcony immediately. "Someone reached the study?" "Briefly," Damien answered coldly. "They knew exactly where to search." Silence spread heavily through the room afterward. Vincent's expression shifted subtly. Concern. Understanding. "Damien." Damien looked toward him sharply. "Say it." Vincent hesitated. "There are not many people who know about the ledger." My pulse stumbled. "What ledger?" Both men looked toward me instantly. Too late. They had already reacted. Damien exhaled quietly before leaning one hand against the desk, exhaustion finally breaking through his control again. Several years ago, he said carefully, I began documenting financial records connected to Mercer's organization. Why? Because eventually men like Mercer stopped fearing consequences. Rain blew harder through the broken balcony doors while papers scattered softly across the floor around us. The ledger contains names, Damien continued quietly. Judges, business owners, politicians, every person Mercer paid to protect his empire. The room suddenly felt much colder. And somebody thinks I know about this? Damien met my eyes steadily. No, his voice lowered almost painfully soft afterward. Somebody thinks you matter enough to hurt me. The honesty in those words stole the breath from my lungs completely. Then another sound echoed suddenly from the living room behind us. Owen's frightened voice. Celine, I turned instantly. Owen stood frozen near the hallway entrance staring toward the penthouse windows. My blood ran cold the second I followed his gaze. Across the river on a neighboring rooftop, a giant illuminated billboard flickered through the rain. Only 3 words glowed across the screen now in bright, white letters. We see you. Sometimes the cruelest threats are the quietest ones. 3 glowing words across a billboard changed the air inside the penthouse instantly. We see you. Rain blurred the white letters across the neighboring rooftop, while thunder rolled low above Manhattan like distant warning drums. Owen stepped backward slowly from the windows. That is for us? Damien moved beside him immediately. Do not look at it anymore. His voice stayed calm, but something darker lived underneath it now. Fury maybe. Fear maybe. Vincent crossed toward the security monitors near the kitchen island. The billboard was hacked remotely, he said sharply. No scheduled advertising rotation. Damien's jaw tightened visibly. Mercer is escalating. I stared at the glowing words across the storm outside, feeling strangely hollow instead of panicked now. Fear eventually burns itself empty. What remains afterward is exhaustion. This is never going to stop, I whispered. Damien looked toward me instantly. It will. How? Silence stretched between us while rain battered the windows hard enough to shake faintly against the glass. Then Damien made a decision. I saw it happen before he spoke. His shoulders straightened slightly. His eyes sharpened. The exhausted man beside the fireplace disappeared again behind something colder. More dangerous. Because I am ending this tonight. Vincent looked up immediately. Damien. Mercer wanted my attention. Damien slipped the silver object from his pocket again. The one recovered from the study floor. Now he has it. I stared at the object carefully under the kitchen lights. A silver chess knight. Small. Elegant. Deliberate. What does that mean? Damien rolled the piece slowly between his fingers. It means the person inside my organization finally revealed himself. Cold realization crept through me instantly. The person helping Mercer. Damien nodded once. Only 3 people knew where the ledger was hidden. Vincent. Damien's eyes lifted sharply. Not Vincent. Vincent looked mildly offended again. Thank you. But Damien already looked somewhere else entirely. Somewhere darker. My cousin Luca. The silence afterward felt heavy enough to crack glass. Family. I whispered. Damien laughed softly then. Bitter. Empty. Family usually hurts you with better aim. Owen shifted nervously near the couch. What happens now? Damien looked toward him carefully. The coldness in his expression softened immediately again. Now you both leave this city for a few days. My head snapped upward. What? Vincent will take you somewhere safe. No, Damien blinked once slowly. Celine, you do not get to decide my life anymore. Something dangerous flickered between us instantly. Not anger exactly. Collision. Mercer already threatened you because of me, Damien said quietly. That makes your safety my responsibility. I am not responsibility. The words came out sharper than intended. I am a person. Silence crashed through the room afterward. Vincent suddenly became very interested in adjusting security cameras again. Damien stared at me for several long seconds. Then something shifted behind his eyes. Understanding maybe. Respect. You are right, he said softly. The apology hidden inside those words stunned me completely. Powerful men rarely admitted fault. Dangerous men almost never did. Rain streaked silver down the windows while the city glowed beneath the storm outside. Then stop deciding things for me, I whispered. Damien stepped closer slowly. Not intimidating. Careful. If Mercer realizes you matter to me, he will keep using that against you. My pulse stumbled hard. Why would I matter to you? The question escaped before pride could stop it. Damien went completely still. For one terrifying second, the entire world seemed to hold its breath around us. Then he answered honestly. Because you looked at me without fear before you knew who I was. My chest tightened painfully. That cannot be enough. For someone like me, he said quietly, it is everything. The honesty in his voice nearly shattered me. Owen cleared his throat awkwardly from the couch. I feel like I should leave the room. Somehow, despite everything, I laughed softly. Damien did too. Small, real, human. Then Vincent's phone buzzed sharply again. He answered instantly before his expression darkened. Damien. The warmth vanished from the room immediately. What now? Vincent lowered the phone slowly. Luca just arrived downstairs. Silence. Dangerous silence. Damien's face became unreadable. Alone. Yes. Security? He requested to speak privately. I watched Damien carefully while lightning flashed silver behind him across the skyline. The exhaustion returned around his eyes suddenly. Older now. Sadder. Family always comes personally when betrayal becomes official, he murmured quietly. Owen looked terrified again. Are we safe? Damien crossed toward him immediately and rested one steady hand against his shoulder. Yes. The certainty in his voice felt absolute. Protective. Final. Then Damien looked toward me one last time before heading for the elevator. No matter what happens downstairs, he said quietly, you stay here. The elevator doors slid open beside him with a soft metallic sound. Rain hammered against the penthouse windows while the city glowed cold and endless below. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized something terrifying. I was no longer afraid of Damien Falco. I was afraid for him.